Good afternoon, folks. Thank you for joining. We will get started in just a few moments. So we've got about another minute until 2 o'clock. Stay tuned. Okay, 2 o'clock on the dot. Thank you so much for joining this afternoon for another in our series of Rittenhouse Online Open Learning Courses, or ROOCs. Today, we are going to talk about outcome-driven content in context, and we welcome everyone who's joining us this afternoon. Excuse me, I'm getting word from our technical folks that I need to share my screen. And there we go. And there we are. Sorry about that. Bear with me during our technical adjustments here. Okay, so today we're here to discuss outcome-driven content in context. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Meg White. I am the product manager for the R2 Digital Library here at Rittenhouse. And this afternoon, I'm joined by Nicole Gallo, our Executive Director of Sales and Marketing. And we're grateful for your time today. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. This session will be recorded and made available on the Rittenhouse YouTube channel. To keep the background noise down, audio is muted for participants. But we do encourage typically questions and discussions, so you can use your GoToWebinar tool on the dashboard, and we will reserve some time this afternoon for discussion and Q&A at the end of our session. So this afternoon, we will discuss trends in educational and professional information, examine the roles of some of the key stakeholders, and hopefully provide some insight into how libraries can adapt to the changing information needs of students and professionals. Our ROOCs generally vary in topic from very specific to tools and services from Rittenhouse, all the way out to more broad topics, more global views of issues that affect professional and scholarly information. And today is definitely a broader view of the landscape in which we are all living our professional lives. So with that in mind, let's just dive right in. So, an analogy or a metaphor to start our discussion: water is always finding its way forward. This is a very simple but very powerful phenomenon. From the Grand Canyon to the mold in your basement, water seems to be able to find its own way. And as we all know, water can change climate, can change landscapes, and ultimately can even change history. So like water, information always finds its way forward. From cave drawings to monasteries to movable type, from print to digital, information continually seeks its own pathway. And like that water moving forward, information can improve lives, and it can enlighten minds, it can drive change. So we all are in the midst of this transition. Our piece on this continuum in terms of information is in the midst of the transition from print to digital. So Moore's law tells us that the rate of change has never been more rapid, and this pace of change really does, for us, in this landscape create unprecedented opportunity to expand knowledge. So we're living through this transition, most of us for a large part of our professional lives, and certainly maybe even parts of our educational life. Mosaic, I am old enough to remember, was introduced in 1993, and Mosaic is the first graphic user interface into the World Wide Web. Came around in 1993, and one might ask, that was quite a while ago. I'm old enough to remember it, but are we there yet? And what has transpired in the years since then? So prior to that time, you could really, the introduction of Mosaic and the World Wide Web and digital content in general, you could really say that information was like a treasure locked away for only a few people to truly see or appreciate. The physical constraints of a book locked in a library limited access to only a few, and one could argue in our past, only an elite few. Information limited by those physical constraints was locked away from the majority of folks who might potentially interact with that information. But like water, information constantly is expanding, and technology has provided information a new pathway forward. So in this new landscape, I was fortunate enough to hear Annette Thomas, Dr. Annette Thomas, who's CEO of Clarivate, speak at the Charleston conference last November, and she described this new environment, the ideal environment, as open, seamless, and connected. Now, Dr. Thomas has a background as a researcher, so as a CEO of a large information company, she's somewhat unique in that she grew up as a user and a consumer of this information, not only to do her research, but to create her own knowledge. So she has a pretty unique perspective, and I thought that this description was very resonant. Within this open, seamless, and connected environment, students and professional information expectations are rising. These students and professionals have no understanding of licenses, publishers, imprints, any of the previous norms that are related to the distribution of scholarly and professional information. This is not really the user's concern. The user of today, and this really goes across generations too, because it applies to our professional lives, but it also applies to our personal lives. We are increasingly living in the world of what I want, when I want it, and where I want it, and this is the expectation. And for the librarians on the phone, in terms of your patrons, I know that you are feeling and seeing this change every day. And it's not just isolated to our professional lives, as I said. So this is where the expectations that the technology creates can really drive those expectations ever increasing. So in that end, I'd like to talk a little bit about what I would call the Sci-Hub paradigm. And most of us are familiar with Sci-Hub and its service that provides access to scholarly articles, a huge percentage, very high percentage of the totally scholarly articles that are currently in print. So at the university, and there's a link here on the slide, which we will make available after the presentation if you'd like to take a look at this study. But study completed by the University of Utrecht tracked actual usage of articles within their collection versus articles that were downloaded within their community by users from Sci-Hub. And what they found was that 75% of the articles downloaded from Sci-Hub could have been provided by the institution's paid subscription to that very same content. In other words, the users could have used the University of Utrecht website to access these articles in a way that was very normal and expected in terms of how scholarly information gets distributed. The publisher published it, made available, the library purchased it via subscription, it was made available to the users. But 75% of those articles were actually downloaded by the University of Utrecht patrons directly from Sci-Hub rather than the library. So then that begs the question, why would a user choose to download an illegal version of an article when the same content was available to them provided by their library? You know, what is really driving this? And one hypothesis is that the content was more quickly and easily discoverable on Sci-Hub. wanted to share with you a quote on this topic from a comment on a recent article posted on the Scholarly Kitchen blog. And this blog post was entitled Researcher to Reader, the R2R Debate. Is Sci-Hub good or bad for scholarly communication? And this, never supposed to read your slides, but I'm going to read this because I think it's a really powerful comment. My campus library pays dearly for access to copyrighted articles. I use Sci-Hub instead because it's faster to find the same items without added hassle or embargo. The question for me is, what do most scholars do when they are denied access either by their weak library holdings or their strong sense of right and wrong? Simple. They email the authors and request a copy, and they get one. Sci-Hub merely makes possible what is already happening, free access. Now, this quote has a lot of interesting and provocative statements, some of them true, some of them very far off the mark. But I think it really illustrates the analogy that we began the conversation with, which is water finding its way forward. This information, just like information has for time immemorial, continues to be able to find its way forward. So given this data, sort of where does that leave us? So what I'd like to suggest for the purposes of our discussion today is to augment Dr. Thomas's open, seamless, and connected environment and add Discoverable. I think it is not enough to be open, connected, and seamless. Users must be able to easily find information. The old models of scarcity that were very prevalent in publishing are publishing and other industries too are evolving to models of abundance. So previously we had those textbooks, those journal articles locked behind the library doors on the shelves, limited by simply their physical presence, and that was a model of scarcity. Now you see information services developing, and you can just take the example of Spotify. This is a model of abundance. Every song that is currently available, or a huge percentage of songs that are currently available, can be accessed by the user. They are present for the user to discover should the user choose to search, find, or curate them. So it really takes the old scarcity model and flips it on its head to a model of abundance. And once you're in that model of abundance, the potential for that information to find its way forward increases exponentially. For those users to find the information that they need increases exponentially. We really think that at Rittenhouse, libraries can and need to play a role in discoverability moving forward. We think it's a very important role for libraries. Who is better positioned to help enable this transition, both in terms of curation of collections, appropriate collections, and also to enable the transition from a model of scarcity to a model of abundance. So libraries, we really believe, can be that gatekeeper, and not only the gatekeeper, the enabler of that information to actually find an appropriate audience. So I'm going to wrap it up here in a few moments, just a couple of slides to talk specifically about discoverability and what that looks like in terms of professional and educational information. So again, libraries, we feel, are very well positioned to really take an active role and a leadership role in this component of this new landscape: an online catalog, a LibGuide, indexed metadata, persistent URLs. In an education environment, a learning management system. In a clinical environment, decision support tools, and any product that supports integration and discovery, the ability to allow that user who really doesn't understand or have any knowledge of a license or a publisher imprint, the ability to find the answers that they need in that open, seamless, and connected environment. Just a couple points about what discoverability does not look like. Information silos, publisher-centric products that focus only on a single publisher's content without the ability to connect to other products are by definition somewhat limited. PDF, there's a joke that goes around about PDF, that the acronym, rather than portable document format, is print the damn file. So this format's been around for a long time, and it certainly has its utility. However, by definition, it's a static format. A PDF without good metadata is really just a big black box, and that certainly does not lend itself to an open, connected, seamless, or certainly discoverable environment. Poor or insufficient metadata. This is an area where libraries, again, can really excel. Librarians are excellent at organizing and labeling and connecting information. So subject area knowledge and organization, these are onboard skill sets for librarians, and increasingly in a discoverable environment, metadata, robust, managed metadata is essential. Finally, lack of participation in linking standards and schemas, and lack of simple access and authentication models. You know, libraries really can help to promote the open, connected, and seamless environment by making sure, or trying to ensure, that the products that you license and hold in your collections adhere to those fundamental philosophical points. In other words, they will work with other products that are in your collection. They will work with your learning management system in an academic environment. They will work with a clinical decision support system in a hospital environment. So a couple examples of what discoverability looks like and what it doesn't look like, simply because libraries are very, very well positioned to take a leadership role in discovery in the new landscape. So we touched on a lot this afternoon, and I'm just about on time. We did leave time for, we typically leave time now for questions, Q&A, but we did leave time this afternoon. We'd prefer even discussion. If there's discussion points that you'd like to bring up, or even ask a question, just use the tool on your GoToWebinar. And if you'd like to know more about some of the topics we discussed today, there is a blog post on Rittenhouse Rights called Outcome-Driven Content in Context that's available. So sort of goes beyond the touch points that we discussed this afternoon, dives a little bit deeper into some of the topics that we touched on. And just so you know, philosophically, I mentioned this, but Rittenhouse is really committed to this open, seamless, and connected and discoverable future. So the R2 library, we do endeavor to make sure that that ebook database is optimized to help support this future. Any number of tools or features on R2 are really designed to be part of this new landscape, and more importantly, help your library be part of this new landscape. So for more information, or to start a conversation or a 30-day trial, just be sure to contact us at customerservice@rittenhouse.com. And we thank you again for your time. I am going to ask Nicole Gallo to please join me and to introduce questions, or perhaps introduce a discussion topic.
Okay. Hi, everyone. This is Nicole Gallo. We do have a few questions that have come in, so I'm going to go ahead and pose these. The first is, can you please provide an example of how a library integrated library content into an EMR or a decision support tool?
Actually, I can do that from an actual customer here at Rittenhouse. And I don't know in terms of longevity of the hospital librarians that we have joining us today, but we have a very large hospital customer in Northern Virginia who actually uses the chapter and section level persistent URLs from the R2 Digital Library to embed in their electronic medical records. And this really, they're using these links in the same way, and I was not familiar with this term until they explained it to me. It was latch, literature attached to charts. And they used to literally, maybe folks on the phone know about this, used to insert, put into the hospital chart relevant journal articles. That was part of the support that their library did for the clinicians. And now, in place of that paper going into the chart, since the chart is electronic, the link to the chapters and sections in R2 that are relevant go directly back into that chart, and then we'll take the user with one click directly into that chapter and section on the R2 Digital Library. And you're probably familiar, the larger hospital systems, I mean, there are definitely tools and services out there and standards that support this, the HL7 standard, definitely support much more technically sophisticated linking, but that's just an example of something that is onboard tools from R2 that can pretty simply and easily be a collaboration between the library and the clinicians in order to make sure that information is readily available to the physicians and the healthcare team that are treating those patients.
Okay, another question has come in, and this is, so what is the responsibility of publishers and third-party providers in this new landscape? Is providing MARC enough?
Wow, that's a good question. I think that publishers and third parties absolutely need to make sure that they are building an environment, whether it's in an instance of like an R2 for a third-party product or for a publisher-centric product. I mentioned in the slides the adherence to some of the integration standards and schemas is important. Also, having robust metadata, and not only having robust metadata, but having an architecture within your platform that allows for, at a minimum, indexing of metadata, so that search results for multiple applications could potentially be searched in one search and pulled back in. You know, in the older days, we used to talk about a federated search, and the accuracy of those types of applications varied widely. People are starting to pay more attention to metadata now, and that will more fully support that open, connected, and seamless environment. Because then you're really not in an environment where the requirement is to search the full text. You're really, if you've got really rich, robust metadata, that will speed that process. So I would say open architecture that allows for indexing, and also very, very robust metadata that allows that information, once the environment's open, ensures that the metadata can be, the content can be discovered.
Okay, we do have another question here. Why do publishers continue to only make their content available in publisher-centric platforms? The easy answer to that is strategic in nature, and I should add, it's not a publisher-centric platform that I think is necessarily problematic. It's a publisher-centric platform that becomes a silo. In other words, it does not have that open architecture that we just discussed. It does not have open and robust metadata that can be searched by other applications. It can't be connected to other applications. So I think that the stumbling block there has been primarily strategic, and any number of reasons, revenue strategy, content strategy, behind some of these publisher-centric products, but in and of themselves, not as problematic. But I think we are to the point now where, you know, no one wants to assume that a single publisher, and we know it's not true, librarians especially, that one publisher would have every potential answer to a clinical question. It's simply impossible. And moving into, especially on the research side, an environment where we do have tools like artificial intelligence and data mining, you're going to want, you know, if you're doing a large-scale data mining project, it's by definition limiting to only be searching a single publisher's data set. So I think that we're going to start to see some of that change, but I think also librarians can drive that change by asking those questions and insisting upon you know, features in some of these platforms that allow them to work well within their environments. All right, I think that is all of our discussion questions. And
And again, so we're finishing about 5 minutes ahead of schedule, so I'm always conscious of your time and so grateful to you for taking the time to be with us this afternoon. Again, I do encourage you to take a look at the Rittenhouse blog at rittenhouse.com, Rittenhouse Writes, to take a look at the expanded blog post on this topic. And this session will also be made available on the Rittenhouse YouTube channel. If you'd like to go back and see the slides or have access to the slides, they will be posted there as well. So again, I thank Nicole for her help, and we thank each of you for joining us this afternoon. And we certainly hope to see or hear from you in the near future. Take care and have a wonderful weekend.